right, back to it now, live from McAllen, Texas. Listen, for the next 2 or 3 days, we're going to be live from McAllen, Texas, talking to important people like Kennedy LaFave, also with the Libre Initiative, who says the idea of immigration reform is not black and white. Here's part of that conversation.
Enforce the laws before we get anywhere. And you say it's not that easy. So let's sort that out a little bit. You live here in McAllen, Texas. You see the problems. You understand what's happening. Why do you say immigration reform is not just part of it, but all of it maybe?
So it's part of it. I wouldn't say that it's all of it. It's a culmination of these things. Especially living here on the border, it's a unique thing. My wife is born and raised here. I have 3 children now that we're raising, that they were born here and we're raising here. We obviously need a secure border. We live here, we work here, we raise our families here, and we want to ensure that these kids can continue prospering, right? We want to ensure that that happens. But if you look at this area, which is a really weird dichotomy, it's one of the top 10 safest cities in the state of Texas. There's over 1,200 cities, and this is one of the safest places. And yet, people who don't live here assume that this place is completely overrun, as you mentioned yourself.
Well, as I said to your colleague George, when we drove through, I'm like, nice city, nice housing, nice shopping areas, nice grocery stores. I don't see any evidence of the problem. So I ask myself, is it hidden?
Yeah, it's done well. And so this is the hard part, too. I know you had George on here a little bit ago on this program. And if you think about where we sit in this area, you have 1,254 miles of border in Texas.
Right.
McAllen is just a small snippet of it.
Sure.
If you look at the agents that are covering the entire border patrol, the entire border, Texas, New Mexico, all the rest of it, there are more police officers in New York City than there is an entire border patrol.
Makes no sense, does it?
Makes no sense. So if we're thinking about security, if you're thinking of beefing it up, building a wall from sea to shining sea, having agents man it like, the Great Wall of China, it's a monumental task. And as you mentioned too, if you're talking about Congress trying to make the laws or trying to make new policy, I mean, they can't even put heads to tails, right? They're adding in Ukraine, they're adding in all these other.
I find it mind-blowing. You have a bill that's 3,500 pages long. It's $95 billion. It includes Ukraine, Israel, Taiwan. Did not include the border. Remarkably, there's not a nickel for border security, and they know that that's not going to fly with certainly most people right of center. And ironically, that bill was also rejected by Bernie Sanders and others, so it was bipartisan rejection as well. My feeling is that we should have single issues per bill. If we're going to fund the border, we'll do that as a standalone bill, Ukraine standalone. I think that we have to do that to address the problems in America. You can't have bills that are 3,000 pages long and expect people to vote on it in a day or two.
Yeah. You're going to spend a couple of days here, and you're going to see what it's like living here on the border of the Rio Grande Valley. And if you look at it, there's so much business here. Texas of itself is 97% privately owned. So if you're talking about building a wall from sea to shining sea, you're talking about a lot of eminent domain. That's another thing that as constitutional conservatives don't really like. And so there's so many different nuances when it comes to, are we wanting true security? What does security look like? It's 2024. Our phones are so much smarter than the phones were in 1986. In fact, they didn't even exist. But that's the last time we saw immigration reform happen, was before I was born.
What would you like to see happen? You live here. The Libre Initiative is teaching conservative principles to Hispanic people, to people in general. What would you like to see in reform? When you say reform, because I know people listening are saying, wait a second, we need to enforce the laws that are already there. And I agree that they have to be enforced because we've gone from 400,000 a year, which is too much, to 8 times that much, 3.2 million last year. What would you put in a reform package?
So actually, go to our website. There's a plug for that, right? BeLibre.org. And we actually list out about 4 steps that you could do. I'm not going to pull what our previous governor did when he ran for president. 3 simple things and forget what they are. But go to our website. You can see it all there. But there's a lot of things that we need. We need everybody to come to the table. When it comes to security, we need the wall is something we have advocated for in the past. We also need a lot of technology there because there's no way you can get enough agents to man that entire structure. It's just impossible. That great statistic is there's more police officers in New York City than there is in the entire Border Patrol. And that's a hard thing to wrap your head around. We also need, as my colleague George mentioned, as we have these tall fences, we need wide gates. We want to see immigration reform change. It's so difficult to see an individual achieve citizenship. I have so many friends in this area as I move down here. And
I know a lot of people that have tried to get in. Cost them a fortune, cost them their life savings. They're still not here. It's 10 years on, and they see people run across the border, and they're mad as hell about it.
And when you only talk about security, you're leaving those individuals cast to the side. Because we know there are a lot of good actors that are trying to come here and do this. Your friends, my friends as well, and they all have a different story of how convoluted and how difficult the situation is to become a citizen and do it the right way. And yet we all preach, right?
Sure.
Do it the right way, do it the right way. But me and you couldn't come together and say, what is the right way? So we want a streamlined system. And I think that's not too much to ask, since the last time that actually happened was 37 years ago.
Maybe a uniform system that works properly. Here's the question, though, because here's what people will be fired up about, and I understand it. They don't like the word amnesty. They don't want to congratulate people and reward people for breaking the law. How do we deal with that?
Well, like I said, like you just mentioned too, when it comes to Congress throwing in a lot of bills, we need to get rid of all of that stuff. We need to focus on what the issue is, and there needs to be bills that are clean, cut, and dry. You're talking about like DACA, for instance. We had a consensus of the GOP as well as Democrats. I mean, Barack Obama won 2 campaigns saying he was going to fix the DACA kids, right?
Not fixed.
Nothing happened, and we had the entire GOP behind Donald Trump saying, "Hey, let's do something like this," and yet that couldn't get through. So we want to address the issues as they come, and we want to address them directly. This type of migrant or that type of migrant. Clean bills are a great thing to have, but of course, it's really hard to get things like that through Congress.
We got about 30 seconds here, though. Yeah. What about amnesty?
Like I said, you got to address each issue. I don't think it's as cut and dry as that would be. Like, hey, wave a pen like Ronald Reagan. This type of migrant or that type of migrant. Clean bills are a great thing to have, but of course, it's really hard to get things like that through Congress.
We got about 30 seconds here, though. Yeah. What about amnesty?
Like I said, you got to address each issue. I don't think it's as cut and dry as that would be. Like, hey, wave a pen like Ronald Reagan did. There's a lot of different nuances to the whole thing.
People want law and order in this country, that's for sure, and they want their border secure, that's for sure. The website again?
BeLibre.org.
Perfect. Kennedy LaFave had a little bit more to say there, but we're up against a hard break. These are the conversations we're going to be having over the next 3 days here, McAllen, Texas, live from the border, a special edition of the Steve Gruber Show. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.